like to go back to the statement that you made that the more conservative Republicans become, that African Americans tend to be more moderate or moderate left.
Right.
What effect has, or do you think, the Democratic Party is having because they're now being seen as being far left? And what effect is that having on the moderate slash just left of moderate?
Well, I think that's not having a tremendous impact because in comparison, Republicans are far right. And so moderate, center left African Americans are looking at the two parties and saying, well, wait a second. I can't go with these folks who want to spend $1 trillion in Iraq and Trent Lott and John McCain and all of these others. Now, I may have problems with some of these folks over the left, but they are closer to me ideologically on many of these issues on which I'm interested. And so from my perspective, I don't think it's had any negative impact. I think the other point that has to be made, particularly from a symbolic perspective, this new Congress has so many African Americans in prominent positions, majority whip, committee chairs, subcommittee chairs, so on and so forth. I think it's difficult for any African American to look at that and say, it's insignificant to my interest, so let me go with the Republicans. It may not be enough to draw everyone to the Democratic Party, but it's a powerful symbol that I don't think can be overlooked when you compare it to the Republican Party, who ran 3 very prominent African Americans for statewide office in November, 2 of whom lost by at least 20 points and 1 of them lost by 10 points. And they're supposed to be the best they have, and so I think that when you look at it that way, on one hand, in the Republican Party, African Americans who run tend to be seen as cannon fodder, political cannon fodder, and Democrats win. And people want to be with winners.
That, following up on that question, it was similar to the one I was going to ask about the role of the church. And is the black church becoming more right, I guess is what I was going to.
I think the black church is the saving grace of the Republican Party. It is through the church that the party believes, with faith-based initiative and other sorts of outreach efforts, that it can carve out a significant enough amount of black voters that it can be competitive and therefore win some elections that they might not otherwise win. I think in many ways the black church, I should just say, sort of for disclosure, while I have an uncle who is a pastor, I also have significant issues with sort of the megachurch movement in the black community because I think it focuses on things other than what churches really need to be doing in communities. But that's just my opinion. Okay, now, having said that, I think the party is hoping that these churches become even more popular and so that they can bring in with them more black voters. But there are black voters who sit in these churches and who reject the political, who reject the politics of of the Republican Party. And the question for me is, how long will that last? Will the drumbeat eventually turn folks around? When you look at, part of the hook is on social, moral issues. But when you look at the Republican Party, more often than not, the moral issues are, let's keep gay folks from getting married and let's stop abortions. That's basically it. But what about the morality of environmental degradation, the morality of these onerous incarceration policies and the immorality of the inherent unfairness that exists in much of the society, and the Republicans don't have anything to say about that. So I think for that reason it's going to be difficult for the party to break through in significant numbers, but the black church is the saving grace of the Republican Party in that regard. Yes.
Following up on her question, do you think that it would be, I don't know, necessarily wise of the Democratic Party to go into the churches and follow the same type of strategy as far as introducing their own drumbeat and moving the black voters in the churches towards the Democratic Party?
Well, I think if you look at the history of black political involvement, you have to start with churches. You know, even going back to the founding of the Republican Party, it was black church leaders who were prominent in helping to form and shape political opinion and political behavior. And then you fast forward through the 1960s, it was black church leaders who looked at the landscape and said, you can make your own decision, but I'm voting for Lyndon Johnson. You know, or you can make your own decision, but I'm voting for Hubert Humphrey or George McGovern and so on. So I think the party can do that, and I think there are segments of the party that want to do that because they don't want to concede these moral issues to the Republicans. So I think going forward you're going to see more of that.
Now, in that same vein, if you are to take away politics, if you're going to separate politics from church, then wouldn't that not be wise for either party to even go into the churches, for the Republicans to come out, for the Democrats to come out and leave church to what it's actually supposed to be?
Well, I think that's one way of looking at it. The fact of the matter is those people who go to church also vote. They're going to vote, so you might as well try to influence them to your means. And I think, you know, just as the Democrats made a tactical error in not responding to the GOP on on religious and moral issues, the Republican Party has sort of conceded black voters to the Democrats, and that's also a tactical error. And so I think that every voter needs to be competed for by every party. And obviously you put more emphasis on folks that you think are going to be more likely to support you, but that's just the way it is. Churchgoers vote just like, you know, football fans or music lovers or you know, people who eat fast food all the time, you know.
Do you think that the Republican Party is actually interested in gaining black votes, or just enough to do what they need to do and win? And so, like, for Ohio example, they got just enough to turn that state around. Do you think that's their only interest, or do you think they have, in your interviews, do they have a genuine concern of winning black voters as a whole, or just enough?
Yeah, well, I think by winning black voters, we need to sort of put some context around that, and that is winning how many black voters. The Republican Party doesn't need a majority of black voters to dominate politics in certain parts of the country. They need just enough. But in addition to that, one of the reasons why I think the party wants to and is in fact seeking, or at least saying they're seeking, black voters, is because it provides some comfort to moderate white suburban voters who don't want to be associated with a party that is seen to be overtly racist or overtly against the interest of black voters. Okay? So if you look at suburban Philadelphia or suburban St. Louis or places like that where elections, or suburban Cincinnati, for example, or suburban Cleveland, where elections can turn, entire states can turn on the movement of 5,000, 10,000 voters in one direction or another, I think that that's really part of it all. The Republicans want black voters, but they also want to appear to want black voters, because appearing to want black voters is serving as a balm, a political salve for suburban whites who are a little uncomfortable with overt political symbolism.